Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I am John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. A good topic for you today. Let's do it. Who is the worst person that you've ever met? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe.
Former boss that acted like everyone's friend to their face but was a horrible monster behind their back. Coworker lost their child and took leave. He complained that his other employee had a miscarriage and went right back to work and doesn't get why she's such a crybaby. Daniel Schneider, former owner of the Washington Redskins. I worked on his private jet, a Gulfstream G650. It has a fiber optic carpet that displays a lit up Redskins logo. It is beautiful and costs something like $80,000 for just the logo part of the carpet. This carpet is a wear item, and the completion manager told me it gets replaced every 60 days. He's a prick. He calls the completion center, demanding people get fired over some delay or line item on the jet. Some guy scratched the jet's skin and it needed a repair, and Snyder wanted the guy fired so bad. He just loves getting people fired. I used to work as a receptionist in a criminal law firm, and there was a client who had murdered someone, served his time, and was now looking at another murder charge. He was the scariest person I've ever met. He made my blood run cold. His eyes were black. He was very menacing and looked like he wanted to murder me on the spot. My brother. He had me swatted by making a false claim that I had a loaded gun and was holding my parents hostage. Then when my mom died from Alzheimer's, he filed a false police report and had me investigated for murder, even though my dad, hospice nurse, and caregiver were all present as I held my mom's hand when she died. My friend's son didn't want to go to college. My friend voiced her disappointment in this decision. The son responded by brutally murdering her with an axe. He then went on to give her eulogy and talk about what a great mom she was prior to being arrested. Gary Hilton, the National Forest serial killer, used to come into the business where I worked. You know, some people have charisma the moment they walk in a room and everybody feels drawn to their positive presence. Gary Hilton had the exact opposite of that. He would get hostile with other customers, with everyone on staff except the owner, and just had such darkness in his eyes. We all tried to get him in and out as quickly as possible, but he never caused such a disturbance that he'd get banned or had the police called on him. He struck me as very mentally ill and belligerent, maybe struggling with addiction, but I was still a little bit surprised by his arrest. He had a dog named Dandy, who he absolutely adored, so I just sort of figured that he wasn't violent. Obviously, I was wrong. When I was in a mall in 2018, a baby in a stroller started crying, and an old man, I guess around 80, ran toward the baby, grabbed the stroller with the baby, and attempted to push the stroller down the escalator. The mom couldn't even react that quickly. Luckily, teenage girls got intervened. I've met some horrible people, but usually have some empathy for them because it was obvious they had shitty upbringings. I always took pride in my ability to read people, and have generally been able to distance myself early on from assholes. But the worst person I think I met was a true covert narcissist, and most likely a psychopath. I honestly thought of her as a true friend and a good person. I started having all of this anxiety I couldn't explain, and when bad things happened to me, and those around me, I wasn't able to connect her to them. Once the mask came off, and I was able to see her for what she really was, and the intentional havoc she wreaked on me, I was beyond disturbed. I now completely understand the phrase, a wolf in sheep's clothing. Worst person I ever met was a university hospital volunteer at a well-known children's cancer ward in the 80s, when I first met him. I had a brother with cancer that was receiving treatment there, and they became fast friends. This guy was a grad student at the world-famous school attached to the hospital. My brother liked this volunteer, and he started visiting my brother at her home. He talked his way into sleeping in my brother's room. I would see them rolling on the floor, but my mom told me to ignore it since this guy was an important university person, and we were lucky to know him. Later, I caught him molesting my brother, but it was played off like this man was being assaulted by my brother, and we had to keep it a secret. This went on for about 7 years, until my brother succumbed to cancer. Meanwhile, this guy became like a talisman connection to my brother and was super close to my parents and extended family. He became a successful tech bro, and his status was totally unimpeachable to my family or anyone else. He's a total psychopath to me anytime we were alone, and denigrated me to the rest of the family since I had an idea of what he was up to. He became the center of my family, and I became estranged from my family because I couldn't take being around his evil aura. Fast forward to the first few months of COVID, and I get a call from my mom that he's in jail. I immediately said, "He's a pedophile, isn't he?" And he got caught. Turned out he was molesting his best friend's kid, and she believed her child and called the cops. I contacted the police and told them what happened growing up. The investigation revealed he had been befriending a lot of young terminally ill boys with cancer and their families. They found a number of those hospital wristbands he kept as souvenirs, including one with my brother's name. Unfortunately, all these kids died and he couldn't be charged for violating them. After a year of investigation, the guy took a plea deal and served 1 year in San Quentin. Ex-mother-in-law once wished on her granddaughter, my child, her son's child, that she would get ill, suffer, and die so I could understand what it's like to lose a child. The offense? Her son went low contact. I had nothing to do with it. How my ex-spouse handled his relationship with his parents was none of my business. I spoke to her, but he did not. So to her, this was akin to him being dead. When my own father died, she also hoped he suffered before he died. He didn't seem like a good man. I haven't spoken to her since that convo in 2012. She's unwell. Carlos Danger, aka Anthony Weiner, who used the alias Carlos Danger when sending dick pics to a random woman and a 15-year-old girl while he was married and serving in Congress. Had a job interview with him before he resigned, and it was all mind games and shitty little power plays to see what I would tolerate. Felt like a mouse stuck in a cage with a snake, so I started subtly messing with him back to show that I wasn't intimidated or impressed, and he immediately ended the interview. When I was in high school, I went to a classmate's house to work on a project and met his family, including his older brother. A few months later, the older brother slaughtered the entire family in their sleep and set the house on fire in an attempt to hide the evidence. Pretty sure that objectively makes him an awful person. For those curious, he never stated a motive. His testimony about how he went into my classmate's room and began stabbing him in his sleep as he began to wake up sent chills through me. May he rot in prison. I had a coworker who was just a little off. She always said the right things and was just far enough from controversy to get all the details, while conveniently being able to stay out of it. I wasn't really close to any of my coworkers, but she had a habit of circling my work area when she needed a break. One day during a training day where we had less to do, she walked over to me while I worked to talk about her daughter and how she came to be. Apparently, she had a huge crush on a guy in college. She kept describing him as model hot, but he didn't like her back at all. However, she was friendly enough with him to get him to still hang out with her. She invited him to someone else's party, offering him a drink when he arrived. Apparently, she slipped something into his drink. She then led him to her bedroom and forced herself on him. According to her, the guy was horrified, having only vague memories of what happened, but waking up with her there to happily admit what she had done. He went to the school to report her, but the school she went to and the state didn't really take female on male cases seriously. The school and state only recognized victims if they had been penetrated. She, however, upon hearing that he'd ratted on her, went to the school crying and claiming he had actually been the one to force himself on her. The school took immediate action. She said they offered her a hotel room away from campus so she could recuperate. She got accommodations while they investigated, and she got tons of sympathy from classmates. The boy she accused? He was taken out of classes until the investigation was finished. He wasn't allowed on campus unless specifically invited to sign forms or give a statement, and was hated by everyone who heard what he was accused of. The school, apparently, has a kind of college trial, separate from an actual state trial, where he was assumed guilty and had to prove his innocence. He couldn't. It's hard to prove a negative, so he was expelled. The best they could do for him was they had evidence he had been drugged, and she admitted to at least that much, so she got a suspension, which was, according to her, them going light on her because she had been victimized. She went on to finish college. She didn't remember what happened to the guy because he blocked her as soon as she was expelled, but she did note that her child came out of her plan and that the daughter looked just like the guy, which she described as a bonus. She talked about the whole thing as if it were some kind of accomplishment. Then, and this actually made me a little sick, she spoke about making a new Facebook account to get around him blocking her so she can find the guy, tell him he has a daughter, apparently she never told him, and force him to pay back child support. She ended her little story, which only really took a few minutes to tell, with, "This is why no one messes with me. I get what I want." She told that whole story without an ounce of remorse. She couldn't take no for an answer, forced herself on a guy, lied and blamed him for it, which got him expelled, secretly had his baby, and planned on suing him for 18 years of child support. So yeah, the absolute worst person I've ever met in person, and luckily she quit after some argument with our boss, so I never saw her again. Well, it pains me to say, but my brother. We used to be like twins, so close. Then he turned into an alcoholic, granny, and animal-abusing meth head. He tried to choke her to death. He can rot in hell for all I care. I miss the old him, definitely. It makes me really sad, so I try not to think about it. Crazy how people can change. One of my former coworkers, apart from being a horrible worker, lying about being a disabled vet, lying about where he graduated from, making enemies of the sandwich store people, being a manipulative and controlling spouse, killing his service animal, and being unwilling and unable to take responsibility for any action whatsoever. He's also actually a Nazi. I work at a hospital. There's a maximum security prison in the county north of us, so we get some of their inmates, especially when they shank each other. The guards will give us a sheet with their basic info like name, social, date of birth. It'll also often have their offenses and gang affiliations, so it's common to have gangbangers with violent offenses, including murder and R. And what's crazy is they're typically incredibly polite. It's actually kind of unnerving. That's a hard one, but the one that comes to mind is my grad school advisor who manipulated me out of the program in the middle of COVID by telling me the department hated me. I'd called her asking for an additional semester to finish my thesis, which, as you can imagine, was very common during COVID, with what the libraries and archives being closed indefinitely, and I was stuck halfway across the country from the university. She told me to communicate openly with her and she'd help. So I told her I was struggling with my mental health, struggling with my thesis, and needed some more time. Instead, that call led me to leaving the program, losing my job and my health insurance. I had a mental breakdown a week later. I ran into the department chair a few years later, and it turned out that she'd made the whole "you're burning bridges in the department and need to take leave before you ruin your career" thing up. Something about tough love. Truly, from the bottom of my heart, that woman.
I know sometimes my opinions stir up some mixed feelings in people, but I try to come at a place with honesty and truth, so here's one for you. If you're a small child who's victimized by an adult and you have no recourse, then you're truly a victim. If you're an adult with higher order thinking and the ability to make complex decisions and figure a way out of things, and you feel like you've been manipulated by another adult to leave a program that you're in as an adult, I'm not saying that what happened wasn't wrong, but you have to take some responsibility for that as well. There's a thing in life called taking responsibility for your actions and your own life. And it's easy to just roll over and blame the world for your problems, but you can do something about it too. You can. So try it. Good luck.
My old friend Jordan, she was boy obsessed and would shame me in front of guys she was flirting with. She would offer to take me out and pay and loudly talk about how she's paying in the restaurant. She would insult me in front of people and would be selfish and rude. She would never let me share anything about myself and would overpower any conversation. I parted ways with her respectfully, and she popped up a month ago and she conned me into the bar to apologize. She went on and on about how sorry she was, and then when I tried to say anything, she'd go, "I just want to say this." And so, okay, you'd think maybe she'd changed a little. Kidding. Decided to go out with her recently, and she did the same exact things she used to do, and also ditched me to go with a guy. She FaceTimed me out of the blue to ask about my ex-boyfriend and to check up on me days after she ditched me, and then proceeded to talk about her boy problems. I ghosted her and never looked back. My sweetest friends even said how badly she treated me when I introduced her to my group. I don't know how anyone can truly be in her presence without wanting to gorge their eyes out. My wife, STBX, she is the most evil, gross human I've ever met. She told me a few months ago my grandmother needed to just die already so we can inherit some money. Now that my grandmother has died, she is over the moon excited about all the money we'll be getting. I'm sick. I just want to give up, throw up, and walk away from everything that has to do with her and her evil greed. Yes, my grandmother left me some money. It's not much, and I really don't want it. I'd rather have both my grandparents alive. The money has no value to me. I hope when her parents leave us, they leave her nothing, because she'll blow every penny she gets and will have nothing to show for it. She's the most diabolical person I know. Father-in-law, who isn't my wife's father, but rather her uncle, won't address me as the father of my son, just says he's here, won't look me in the eyes or shake my hand unless I approached first, and only sees my wife as a daughter when it's convenient for him. My only crime, honestly? Putting him and his clan, sans my wife, on blast for putting my wife and I in a financial crisis. I am treated like an outsider because I don't fall in line with his vision. All that is okay, except my wife gets on me when I don't acknowledge him. And I love that woman beyond words. So to make my marriage work, I have to swallow a shit sandwich while he is served classic ham and cheese. Man. Also, strong gut feeling he may have molested my wife when she was a child, because she says she has no real recollection of her childhood until 7th grade. Yeah, major red flag for me. Sorry for the rant, but this post just kicked a hornet's nest in me. My grandmother. She was an abusive alcoholic who physically and mentally abused my mother and my uncle when they were kids, and later on me. Everyone in my family cut her off when she refused to quit drinking and get help. Ironically, she told my mother she was dying of cancer so she could have a free place to live for a decade. What ended up killing her? Cancer. Specifically related to alcohol abuse, a decade after my mom kicked her out. Karma's real. My husband's ex-boss. He poached my husband from a different company and made the job seem amazing and made promises he had no intention of keeping, like, "You'll be able to be home with your family whenever you need to be." I was expecting at the time, and he knew it. There will be so much opportunity for commission, and this is a small company, so we don't have corporate insurance, but pick out your own and I'll pay for it. As it turns out, my husband was traveling to the next state over and would be gone Sunday night through Saturday morning every week. I was home by myself and wondering how we would juggle everything once our baby arrived. Insurance was also never paid for despite it being promised. Soon after, my younger brother unexpectedly passed. It was absolutely horrific, and my husband was over 400 miles away. He begged his boss to come home for the week to be with my family and be able to attend his funeral. His boss seemed so sympathetic and told him to take all the time he needed, but he only ended up taking 5 days off. Immediately upon returning to work, his boss became incredibly critical of my husband. Mind you, he'd only been there a few months and had very little support, although he never outright said it was because my husband took off time for family funeral. He alluded to it multiple times. Now we know he was nitpicking on purpose to find a reason to fire my husband. He did end up firing my husband in front of the whole company, going so far as to throw all of his personal belongings from his work vehicle onto the pavement and telling him to find his own way home. We lived miles away and it was the middle of August. As horrible as all of this was, the worst part was he didn't pay out my husband and any of his earned commission. Commission was his main form of income, and it would have been around $20,000 pre-tax. We now know this is his tactic. Find and lure a good salesman, then find any reason to fire them during their probation so he can keep all the money he earned. I ended up miscarrying our baby after years of infertility treatments, and I believe the situation was a contributing factor. This was genuinely the worst time in our lives, and he made it so much worse. You, Tim. Customer at a store I worked at in my 20s. Large and vigorous woman in her 60s loudly proclaimed herself Christian and touted all the religious virtues she had. Taught Sunday school. The meanest, cruelest, most vile woman I ever met. Had to have a staff member wait on her when she shopped, carrying her basket and pulling the products off the shelves for her, and just a constant flood of denigration, abuse, and backhanded compliments the whole time. She could walk and use her limbs just fine, mind you, but she spent enough that our boss told us to do it and suck it up. Reduced a truly sweet coworker to tears every chance she got. One day she broke down completely, crying that it was so unfair that her wonderful grandmother had Alzheimer's and was dying while this bitch continued to walk the world. I went to grad school with a guy that was a total doofus. I never liked him very much because he didn't put in much effort and wasn't ever very smart, but he picked an advisor that was known for getting people through the program, and so he got his PhD in math without learning all too much. I found out a few years ago he's in jail for the rest of his life for marring his 8-year-old adopted daughter. It put the negative feelings I had for his skating by while the rest of us struggled in perspective. He was a really naive Christian dude and believed that he saw a man regrow a leg during prayer at work. I always viewed him as naive beyond belief, but I never would have guessed that he's a proper villain. A manager I once had would be nice to everyone except me, use things I told her in confidence before she turned into a bitch against me, write me up for not doing things she never trained me to do, tell me I could have certain days off to go away with my boyfriend but then schedule me for those days, etc. My 2 other coworkers in the department thankfully didn't dismiss it when I told them how she treated me, but didn't share the same experience until I left. A little while after I quit, my 2 coworkers told my boyfriend she ended up doing the same thing to them. She eventually got fired. Brenda B. is the worst human being I've ever met. She lives in the U.S., is an immigrant, 4 kids, 2 here illegally, none of which speak to her. 3 or 4 husbands, had her first kid at 14, committed illegal alien Medicaid fraud to the tune of $1.3 million, and is proud of all the above. She's a racist, and I mean hard R kind of racist. She despises anyone that's not like her, talks shit about literally everyone who turns their back to her, loves to tell people that bullying is a good thing, screams, "I have no empathy," when someone who donated to her kids' GoFundMe that she used for new tits and a new trailer, since Medicaid footed the bill, asked her to donate to a GoFundMe for an accident, is proud of the animals she cycled through and killed when she was done with them, is a Nazi with a capital N, told her that slavery and the Holocaust were lies, and that the most discriminated against human in all of history is the white man. All of this with a straight face. After the Nazi shit, I put in my notice, "You, Brenda B., I hope your husband gets everything he voted for." Oh, wow. I worked for Jeep Chrysler, and there was a GM that was such an awful human, being he would illegally finance handicapped accessible vans for people in the town, and right away get his picture taken with them for the paper. He knew they were going to be repossessed sooner or later, but he'd be long gone by then. He used the Chrysler credit card to take his wife to Beverly Hills for weekend shopping sprees. Later, we found out he spent $350 on a pair of socks, $2,500 on Gucci loafers, and a Gucci belt, plus thousands on the wife's sex toys and unmentionables. He smoked 3 packs a day, never saw him eat a fruit or vegetable ever. When it all came crashing down at his dealership, he went to the entrance doors and wiped snot all over the door handles before the police and financial people busted in. He was the epitome of a car salesman. Absolute scum. Zero scruples. Would and did rip off his own family and loved ones without batting an eye. He ended up having his heart to a Neil Peart double bass drum solo after doing a massive hot rail of fentanyl and lace blow. A perfect ending to the worst human I've ever encountered. My grandmother. She misspelled my name my whole life on purpose. If I sat at the piano, she would tell me to not play and call my cousin, 10 days younger, over to play. I was by far the better pianist. She would make cookies for the cousins when we all visited and would walk around serving them, but when she got to me, she would tell me I was too fat and couldn't have any. For our 16th birthday, she gave my cousin a car. She gave me a plastic accordion folded rain bonnet, like they used to sell in fish bowls at a drugstore counter. It still had the 25-cent price tag on it. And when she passed away, she left me a bowl, but not the sapphire ring she had repeatedly told me she wanted me to have. By then, my cousin had married a Baptist preacher at 18 years old. She left her $60,000. Yep, my grandmother was a real piece of work. Fortunately, she lived in another state, so I didn't have to experience her rejection more than once or twice a year. There was a kid in high school who was the creepiest and most up individual I'd ever had the misfortune of knowing. He threatened to shoot up the school in a snapshot post. The headmaster went on the intercom the next day and ensured that he was suspended indefinitely. The kid went to some psych ward. Rumor has it his parents threatened to sue the school. Our high school was $2 million in debt due to an accounting error, so even though the case would have been won by the district, they couldn't even afford a lawyer to fight it. During this time, I learned that he had Ard, one of his classmates. Apparently, he was allowed to attend the mandatory sitting of the SATs, where we all crowded into the gymnasium. One of my friends had a panic attack because it was the perfect place to hold a shooting. I was also nervous because he sat behind me. Then one day I walked into Honors Government and he was sitting right next to his victim. A few weeks later, she confided that he had just sent her a snap, telling her not to come to school that day with a pic of a gun. I told the guidance counselor, but because I refused to give up the victim's name, I don't betray trust, she did nothing, okay? He remained in school. The day before graduation, he was finally arrested for 9 counts of SA. Instead of trying him as an adult when he was 17, an option in my state, they waited until he was officially 18 with many other victims. He only served a short time. When he got out, he defied parole by pretending to be a child on social media in order to groom girls. He assaulted at least one according to my sources. It took until he and his friend uploaded a video where they tapped their names and then they liked R-ing women before cops did anything. And he got out and is doing it again. He's a serial child R who nearly shot up my school and got away with it. So this is the worst person I've ever met. But the adults in the administration and justice system who allowed it to continue are also guilty as hell.